Hey, everybody, it's Friday. It's Hotline time. It's Daniel and it's me. We do this every week. We do a live hour of just taking questions on everything around CMMC, NIST controls, DFAR cybersecurity requirements, all the stuff, Daniel, as you say, all the acronyms that people love to hate. We're streaming on YouTube. We're streaming on LinkedIn. You can go to CUIHotline.org. You can call the number and leave a message. We got one over the last week that we're going to play. You can leave your questions via the form over there if you've got something more in depth that you'd like us to check out. And yeah, we'll just jump right into it. First of all, breaking news. If you hadn't been on LinkedIn yet today, you might have missed the news. We now have 50 clients that have achieved CMMC level 2 C3 PAO status. 50 of them, the big 5-0. Big milestone, big achievement. And great for our customers who've been able to, rest easy at this point because they're good to go. Phased rollout is now 39 days away. We are 35% of the way through that 60-day delay period, which, as I posted this morning, is 35% is a wonderful number because it's also the number of the percentage of the DIB that the DoD says will need a level 2 certification. So what do you know? A big coinky dink, as we say in the industry. Yeah, so there you go. Daniel, let's just jump right into your thought of the week here. When I asked you this morning, I was like, what's your thought of the week? You just said Lockheed. One word.
I do. And here's the interesting thing. It's not just Lockheed first out of the gate. What we're seeing with the way primes are addressing their supply chain risk, in my personal opinion, leaves something to be desired. Lockheed came out with the blog. We were actually pretty excited for it, right? Because the stance that they take, they have one of the largest supply chains in the DIB, as you can imagine. And they basically did this scoring kind of red light, green light, yellow light type scoring methodology of how they plan to rank their supply chain. And they use a form called the CCRA, which you're probably familiar with. A lot of large primes decide to come together. Jacob, you and I have talked about the actual form itself is kind of flawed because it doesn't look at assessment objectives or FedRAMP or other things like that that can also be concerning and basically make somebody compliant and or non-compliant. And so, there's a little bit kind of lackluster there in the CCRA. Lockheed comes out with the blog saying, hey, we're going to give you this red, yellow, kind of green status based on where you stand meeting requirements, right? And so, the good news is the work that we do here at Summit 7, we can well exceed the green status of what Lockheed is asking because we're implementing the full 110 controls. Lockheed says in order to be green status, you need to be 31 of these controls implemented. And the kind of conundrum is because a lot of the subcontracting base doesn't listen to the DoD, right? Jacob and I talk about this all the time. We're kind of in an echo chamber for the people that we talk to. But a lot of people listen to Lockheed and a lot of people listen to Boeing and a lot of people listen to you name the prime that they are primarily working with. That's who they're going to listen to for requirements that are going to be flown down to them way more than the DoD. So again, although Lockheed's the one that posts the blog, this is a pretty large kind of epidemic of primes in the supply chain program. And honestly, subcontractors potentially being misinformed about the level of compliance that they're actually achieving, right? So if they go in and meet the 31 controls, they're going to think, hey, I'm good with Lockheed, I'm green status. The problem is that 31 does not represent even the minimum requirement it takes for a conditional CMMC policy, right? And so or CMMC assessment or submission. And so when you're looking at this, I just ask everybody, do your due diligence, understand the actual requirements of what CMMC is going to actually require of you. Obviously work with your prime, communicate with your prime and say, hey, I see that I need 31. I see that I'm green, but I also know that puts me as a disadvantage because you can't use me for CMMC level 2 requirements because I'm not meeting the minimum full requirements of CMMC level 2. So have an open conversation. Lockheed's out there trying to manage their supply chain risk. I just appreciate them posting anything, quite honestly, because at the end of the day, a lot of primes are still not really actively talking about it, right? Yeah. Boeing posted the newsletter that just said basically act now, do CMMC certification. And that was kind of the end of it, right? And it's we need more primes to be involved in this communication. Lockheed and HII, I think, are the two that I've seen mostly doing their or I don't even know what I'm trying to say, doing the most communication to their supply chain. But if you know other people that have posted content, Prime to their subs, we'd love to see it in chat. We'd love to kind of understand how other people are articulating this, minimum requirements on their side, things like that. But November 10th is not that far away. Even if we're self-attesting a majority of the contracts, right, which you and I have gone back and forth multiple times on, that we don't see that as a huge viable option, it still doesn't meet that minimum requirement. So anyways, know the requirement yourself. Don't solely rely on a Prime communicating things to you about the minimum requirements, and just make sure that you're able to continue to be awarded business as a sub, no matter the Prime that you're working with, because you've met the actual real CMMC requirements. So that's the end of my soapbox for a while. Again, I know Lockheed was my tagline because they're the kind of the biggest one that happened to produce content recently. This is way larger than just Lockheed. This is a systemic problem with supply chain risk that I've seen. And I just want people to be informed. I want the small businesses of the world to know the truth and reality of what it's going to take them to be compliant. And that's really what we're here for. We're here to support the DIB. We want to educate. We want to teach. We want to train. And again, from the marketing perspective, what's great about our solution is you'll be the brightest color of green you could imagine to Lockheed because we surpassed those 31 minimum requirements there. So
yeah,
that's
absolutely. I mean,
I'm done now.
This is, if anybody hasn't looked, you got to download the CCRA form off of the DIB SCC website, and you got to enable macros. So I think that this is one giant social experiment, and that if you have downloaded an Excel file and enabled macros off the website, then you're automatically disenrolled from a secure supplier database. That's just the whole test. But anyways, if you do trust the file and you download the spreadsheet, they'll give you this list of the 31 requirements from 800-171, and they have somehow come up with a categorization 1, 2, or 3 for each of these requirements. In order to meet that green status, you have to indicate that you have implemented all of the requirements. As you said, there is no relationship to 800-171A, so you're literally just self-attesting that you've done it. They don't mention 171A anywhere, so you know what people are going to do. They're going to say, "Yeah, sounds like we do that." Check, and they're gonna say that they do it. Like you said, there's no relationship to POAM items. There's no relationship to CMMC score weighting, the 5, 3, or 1 point requirements. Some of the Cat 1 requirements are 5 points. Some of the Cat 3 requirements are 5 points. Most of the 5-point requirements aren't even in this list. So if you had a green status, you would not qualify to get out of phase 1 of a CMMC assessment. They say on their blog that this indicates strong CMMC readiness. I have no idea. I mean, it's better than nothing. You have 31 of the requirements implemented. That's really good, assuming they are implemented according to 171A, but they don't explain the methodology about what is it about these 31 requirements that indicate that your readiness is high, because there's a lot of stuff that's missing. I don't know. So I believe going through the math, we'd have to go back through and double check into some more analysis. If you had all 31 of these requirements implemented, your SPRS score would be a -93, which, as we have heard, unofficially, people have been told by their customers, "Hey, your SPRS score is too low, get it up," right? So being green for Lockheed is not necessarily being 0 in SPRS. Being 0 in SPRS is not necessarily being POAMable, cleared for CMMC assessment. So listen to your customer. This is what they want to see. Obviously, we can knock out these 31 with our solutions pretty quick, fast, and easy. But there's a lot of stuff in here. Like you said, FedRAMP, 171A, POAMs, CMMC scoring, things like that. Makes me feel very uneasy about how people could potentially interpret what's going on here. So just do your due diligence, folks.
Yep.
All righty, let's see here. Okay. All right. So I posted this morning that the DoD estimates 35% of the DIB will require CMMC level 2 certification. They estimate 2% of the DIB will qualify for level 2 self-assessment. And then somebody said this total number of companies, the like 300,000 some odd companies affected across all levels, feels like it's underrepresenting the number of subcontractors out there. That is true, right? The DoD does not have full visibility into the supply chain. They aren't able to estimate the number of subcontractors that are involved as the data and the requirements, and therefore the CMMC verification flows down the supply chain. For many legal and regulatory reasons, they aren't even allowed to ask. So that's what the flow down mechanisms are there for. So the estimates are not accurate in terms of the total number. So maybe the percentage breakdown is a better rule of thumb, because they don't know the specific number, but maybe they know the rough ratio of companies that should have it. They also admit that they don't track which awards have CUI in them or not. Every DoD contract that gets sent out has DFAR 7012 in it. That doesn't mean it necessarily has CUI. So according to the SMEs they used in the estimates, they said 35%. It's probably higher ratio for subcontractors. They just don't know, right?
Yep.
They don't know how many contracts are specifically for COTS awards. They don't know a lot of stuff about the supply chain or the nature of the data involved in those contract awards. So somebody asked me the question, if the estimates are bad, how should my company think about its CMMC risk? How do I orient myself to what's going on if I can't trust the estimates that are being put out there, right? And I said that, the golden rule here is your relationship to your specific customer. It's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to extrapolate your specific situation from high-level Pentagon policy that's going to filter out across all the components, all the requiring activities, all the programs and program offices and individual program managers, let alone prime contractors and their purchasers, right? So the general way to do it is, what is the nature of the data that you're going to be handling in your business, right? Not even necessarily within the nature of the contract. If you make precision parts that go on weapon systems, you're probably going to be dealing with CTI data. And as we know, CTI data at a minimum requires level 2 certification. So very, very strong chance that you're going to need a level 2 certification sooner rather than later. The other thing from there, like we've talked about in the past, is what is your customer's long-range acquisition forecast? When are you planning on bidding on opportunities that are going to show up after CMMC begins to roll out in its phases, right? So if you're planning on bidding on a new contract in the summer of next year, and they're going to award that contract at the beginning of fall, and you say, well, we always work with CTI, then it's reasonable to assume they're going to require level 2 certification by the time of that award. If you wait until you see the solicitation in the summer, you are then constraining yourself to a couple of months. Maybe they say it's self-assessment and you are good, but if they don't, you're out of time, right? It'll be more expensive. It'll be more stressful. It'll be a rougher experience than it needs to be than starting right now, knowing what it looks like 12 months from now, and then taking 12 months to get there. That does mean that you necessarily have to start before you see the specific requirement in a solicitation, but the writing is on the wall at this point. You're going to have the requirement, right? So so that's what I would say. Very difficult to estimate individual situations out of the estimates. And so the best way to do it is just to combine the type of work that you do for your specific customer, what your specific customer has told you, and their long-range acquisition forecast, and then work backwards from there for how long of a timeline you have. I was mentioning this on a podcast with the guys over at A-Line yesterday, and I was saying this is a helpful framework because it makes the conversation, Daniel, I'm sure you can appreciate this. This makes the conversation with sales teams at service providers a lot more straightforward, because they can go into the phone call and say, we know that we have this long in order to get ready. Can you help us? How much? Yes, no. And then that's it. Because if you go to a service provider and you're like, can you help us with CMMC? It's a lot of, well, of course we can. Like, we can do this and we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. And you just get a lot of options thrown at you all the time. And then you're trying to figure out, when do I start? How long can I wait? Which is a reasonable thing to ask. if you go into the conversation being like, I need this on this timeline, how much, then you just take that same question to everybody and then pick the best one, right? So,
Yep.
I mean, your phone calls would be probably 5 minutes long if everybody did that.
I know. It's like, oh, sorry, we can't, we can do that.
Yeah,
we can't do that. That's the
We
interesting
can,
thing. I mean,
we
every
can't,
call,
it makes everybody's life a lot easier. So I think that framework is probably the best one for people that I've been able to come up with so far. So there you go.
I mean, every conversation we're having right now, it's like, okay, how fast can you do it? Or Jacob, you were on a call with me this morning. The client or the prospect didn't even know November 10th was like a deadline, right? And so I think people are also kind of unaware of like the ones that know to ask about backlog, timeline, period of performance to get compliant are those that are educated, but we're still talking to a lot of people. It's a little bit of a tangent that still don't even know what just happened with CMMC and the November 10th effective date. And so the people listening here, you guys are people that are aware and kind of in the echo chamber. But we're talking to people on a daily basis that honestly get triggered by something like a Lockheed blog, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, I did forget about the CMMC. Lockheed reminded me I need to go figure out how to do this thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just very interesting because, yeah, the overarching larger subcontractor supply chain is honestly, in my opinion, I don't think they've woken up. I think we've maybe 5 or 10% are actually kind of active and aware. And I think there's probably 80 to 90% that are still kind of sleeping, which is concerning, quite honestly. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Lockheed, if you're listening, strongly worded blog does more than anything else because they listen to you.
100%.
They don't listen to rulemaking. So help us
Absolutely.
help you because we can
Keep
amplify your
publishing
blog.
strong
But
blogs for the
we
love of
need
God.
you to write the
Please do
blog
that.
in order for us to be able to amplify it. We can't write it for you. So there you go.
Yes.
All righty, let's do a little bit of a backlog here and then we'll get into chat. Is CMMC certification a requirement to bid on contracts?
Oh, so
Everybody say it together. No.
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 But Vincent Scott brought this up. I think that was him who brought it up about having to submit your CMMC UID prior to award. And it's like, well, if you have a CMMC UID, that kind of in turns at least doesn't necessarily tell maybe if you're certified or not, because that would be an EMAS, but it does say that you have a CMMC boundary, meaning you've done some level of CMMC. So they kind of like in a weird way got their way-ish without getting their way on the bid stuff. But yeah, do you actually have to hold the final requirement, the 88 of 110 or the 110 or the cert? No, you don't have to bid.
Yeah. Technically, right, the way that it works is you have to have your CMMC status to take award of the contract. So you don't need a CMMC status to bid on the contract. However, you have to submit your CMMC UID, the status that's tied to a specific information system that will be used in the contract with your proposal. So, either way, like we talked about, most people will not have enough time if they wait until they see the solicitation to then get everything done. So you necessarily have to start beforehand if you want to make your life as painless as possible and increase your odds of meeting the requirement in order to take award. So you would have that CMMC UID before the time to submit your proposal. Technically, it's not required, but it's also sort of required. Really, really fun situation there. Alrighty. Somebody asked me this on LinkedIn today, and I thought it was pretty interesting. Fast forward to November 10th. What does the next 12 months look like, Daniel?
An insane amount of acquisitions. I think the next 12 months will be the beginning of the larger consolidation of the DIB. I think with the mix of FAR CUI, I think we're actually going to see that expand pretty rapidly because here's the thing. You talk about this all the time. The DoD has been incredibly generous with communicating as much about CMMC as they have. FAR CUI is just going to hit final with an effective date. Go do it. Right. And so there's not this same kind of build up and like, hey, it's happening. It's not happening. It's literally just going to happen. Right. And that's going to take a larger kind of addressable market from, let's say 80,000 on the low end for CMMC, probably upwards of a few 100,000 when FAR CUI is involved, So I think the next 12 months are going to be the year of intense cyber regulations and the year of mass acquisitions and consolidation of the supply chain. That's my crystal ball. What's going to happen? I just hope that the organizations that want to stay around, at least for their defense practices, are already on that journey. Because somebody quoted me. I was at a construction conference this week. Sorry, time is a blur. And we talked about CMMC at this construction event. Great event. John from Tutor Perini hosted it. He's a chairman. It was fantastic. And one of the people quoted me. They're like, you can be early to CMMC, you can be late, but you can't be on time. And the window for on time is basically evaporated at this point. It is non-existent. And it's going to be even more dramatic when FAR CUI drops.
Well, the worst part, right, is because of this government shutdown, the FY26 long-range acquisition forecasts aren't getting posted.
Right? I got a LinkedIn message an hour ago about that. This individual's executive team believes that they're not going to have to do CMMC because the government shut down. Right. So hear us loud and clear. The effective date does not move because the government is in shutdown.
Correct. Yeah. I'll add this to the
that has zero bearing, but just so everyone's awareness, I have a feeling a lot of executives, again, who are looking for some way out of CMMC are just out here grasping, right? For the grasping at straws here. So
now if the government, if the rule were still at OIRA pending getting sent over to the Federal Register, if the rule were at the Federal Register pending publication, if the rule were still with DoD pending submission for regulatory review, then the government shutdown would delay what's going on because they can't finish that process until the shutdown is done. But that's all over with. The rule has been published. We have an effective date. This is the crazy part. What happens if we have one of these record-setting 30, 40-day long government shutdowns? By the time the government comes back online, then new solicitations and contracts would be there with this requirement because the phased rollout would begin, right? So there would be even less. Actually, I don't know. Can somebody check this for me? So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on SAM.gov put out their notices telling their supply chain, hey, CMMC is coming. November 10th is the day that we're going to start. We're going to do a webinar. I believe their webinar was originally scheduled for October 15th. Are they still doing that during the shutdown, or is that getting postponed? I don't actually know. I just thought of that just now.
Good question. I have it on my calendar for the 15th. I'm looking up. I don't see.
Because they were by far like one of the loudest about saying, hey, it's here. Hey, it's happening. Here's what's going on. We're doing a webinar. We're letting our supply chain know. They were there at Summit 7 Live in Dallas, Fort Worth a couple weeks ago. And awesome to talk to their team. But I don't actually know if they're still going to be doing that webinar or not because of the shutdown. So it would be big on them if they did do it because they'd be volunteering their time.
So they've not updated it since still on the 15th, but there won't be maybe anyone to do it. For those that are interested in it, I'll drop the link in chat. We will be attending.
Wouldn't that be something if the government comes back online and then the next day it just goes into phase 1 because it won't affect it. The only thing that would affect CMMC is the same thing that affects all DoD contracts is during the shutdown. If they're not issuing new solicitations, then they're just not issuing new solicitations. It doesn't have anything specific to do with CMMC at all. So. Let's see here. Can I win a contract if I have a POAM, if I have a plan of action and milestones that documents controls that are unimplemented as a result of assessment findings? Yes, you can. You can win a contract with what is known as a conditional status. Now, CMMC has 3 levels, level 1, level 2, level 3. There is no conditional status at level 1. It's all or nothing. You have to have what they call a final status, which means all the requirements are implemented. So there's only such a thing as CMMC level 1 final status. However, at level 2 and at level 3, you can have what's known as a conditional status, which means you haven't implemented all of the requirements. If you have level 2 final, level 3 final, so on and so forth, right? However, there is specific guidance about which requirements can be unimplemented and which cannot. Most requirements must be implemented. CMMC breaks down their scoring system at level 2 by ranking their requirements with 5 points, 3 points, or 1 point. You are not allowed to have any of the 5-point controls unimplemented. You are not allowed to have any of the 3-point controls unimplemented. And there is a subset of the 1-point controls that you must have implemented. The remaining 1-point controls, you can have a fraction of them unimplemented as long as your total score is 88%, I believe, is the metric. This is all outlined in 32 CFR 170. If you Google that and click on it, scroll down to POAM guidance, it will tell you which requirements must be implemented, which requirements are eligible for a POAM. If you do have a conditional status, you can be awarded a contract. However, you have 180 days to close those items and go through what is called a closeout assessment. If it was a self-assessment, you get to do it. If it was a C3PAO assessment, you got to get the C3PAO to do it. If you don't do it within that 180 days, your status will expire and standard contractual remedies will apply according to the DoD. So yeah, you can win the contract if you have a POAM. That was the olive branch from 1.0 when they said absolutely not. Everyone that works with the DoD must have everything implemented. And they said, okay, fine, you can have POAMs. That is true, but it's a very small number of things that can be on the POAM. So just be aware going into your assessment.
I've got a question, Jacob, because for the self-attesting, for people putting in an SPRS score for CMMC level 2, the DoD assessment methodology doesn't say which controls are, available for conditional status, right? And so 2 things. Number 1, do you think people are still going to use the DoD assessment methodology to score themselves in SPRS, unaware of the controls they can't use for that score to get the minimum requirement? Or do you think that the DoD is going to update the assessment methodology, but almost like a CMMC score for level 2 self-assessments that includes FedRAMP and that includes what it actually takes to be a minimum of conditional? And to Jack's point, it's 80% total, 88 out of 110 controls is conditional. Yeah.
I don't think the DoD is going to change that at all. I think that, we'll double check it. I believe that's right, Jack. Essentially, the way that the standard SPRS scoring works, this just gets back to the same issue. Self-assessments and self-attested compliance ain't worth the paper it's written on. Because if you submit a 105 and I submit a 105, which one of us is missing multi-factor authentication and which one of us is missing 5 POAMable 1-point controls? You have no idea, right?
Yes.
You have no idea. It's a completely arbitrary, like very rough metric. It's just self-attestation with more steps. The standard way of calculating the score, if people don't put 2 and 2 together, they're going to upload a 90, which is a fine score, but they might be missing 5-point controls. 4 of the 5-point controls, if you will. And that wouldn't be allowed on a POAM if they had gone through a C3PAO assessment. So hopefully they go through with the proper guidance, but I think we all know that that is not a reliable way of having people stick to the Scouts Honor, way of allowing POAMable items. I can guarantee you this. There isn't a single company on planet Earth that if they get a CMMC level 2 self-assessment requirement that's going to fail themselves. You'd think that anybody is going to do that? Like, there is no one on Earth that would fail a level 2 self-assessment if they are assessing themselves. If you think that there's a company out there that would disqualify themselves because they, don't meet the minimum score in a level 2 self-assessment, I got a bridge to sell you because that just ain't going to work. So yeah. Read the POAM guidance, everybody. Make sure you're being honest with your score, because eventually, especially after phase 1, level 2 certification is going to be the way that it goes, and you won't be able to bend the rules quite as much. So,
and Scott has brought this up before, and I agree. Be prepared to challenge every lost contract award, because if self-attestment is a real thing, the fact that it's actually accurate in general is a big thing. The fact that they did it correctly from a what controls can actually be on a POAM and which cannot for conditional. Just be ready to open up that door. If you've done the right thing, I think you will have some insane grounds for protest or dispute around contract award if you didn't win.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, Daniel, we're too expensive. You're too expensive, period. how much does it cost to just do it in-house? I'm just going to hire my own people. I don't want to talk to you anymore. How much does that cost? It's got to be cheaper.
The math that we've done, especially if you're looking to hire a CCP or a CCA, somebody on staff that knows the compliance. Let's say you already have a technical team and you're going to dotted line some of their time. Then you got to buy the gov licensing. If you're doing, this is an enclave scenario, right? Virtual desktop. You have to do all of those other elements. Even just a fully burdened CCP or CCA, I mean, you know, with insurance and everything, you're looking close to $200,000 a year just in a resource. But you take all of that into the equation, you're probably looking at about $500,000 a year when you fully burdened across the board to do it yourself. And that doesn't include if you're buying hardware, right? This is all virtual desktops. If you're buying hardware, you might be able to cut costs in one way because you can host it on-prem, but then you have physical access controls in your facility that you have to account for versus something like a cloud-based VDI. Anyways, long story short, doing it yourself for a small enclave, you're looking at about $500,000 all in internally.
That seems more expensive.
It's more expensive. Yeah, we're about a third cheaper than that, give or take, in comparison. Maybe even more than that. I'd have to sit down and do the math, but yeah, probably close to half actually.
Yeah.
Of what we
are. If every deal that we did was more than $500,000, I could afford to remodel this office.
Yeah, we get you some new lights, new camera, the whole shebang.
Yeah, it is not cheaper to do it in-house. No. And it, you know, it's like a lot of things, especially for a small business, right? You outsource things just from a raw business perspective. You're going to outsource a lot of specialty things because it's cheaper to do it than hiring it in-house. You're not going to have in-house counsel because it's cheaper to do it outside. A lot of very small businesses, they might do their financial work or their accounting with outside resources, right? It just makes sense to outsource things. Same thing with cybersecurity. If you could even find the people who know how to do all this stuff, you probably can't afford them. And as our friend Ryan Bonner says, if you somehow find a unicorn that can do all the technical work and all the compliance work together, they're not sticking around for very long because they're going to go start the next Summit 7. That's
exactly right. Summit 8.
Yeah,
we're right at 60%, give or take, cheaper than that, which is
Don't
nice.
name it Summit 8. We'll fight. All righty.
That's right.
All righty.
Let's see if I can get some better Waffle House art. I don't know about that, Bruce. This is pretty great over here. So where's my pointer at? There it is.
I heard the phased rollout was 7 years long. Is that right? Okay, so the phased rollout takes place over a series of 12-month periods. You've got phase 1, the first 12 months, phase 2, the next 12 months, phase 3, the next 12 months. And then when you hit phase 4, it's full implementation. There are no more phases after that. So phase 4 is the permanent phase, right? So we've got a handful of 12-month phases, which basically introduces, you know, increasing levels of CMMC requirements in contracts officially. However, each of those stages is up to DoD discretion, as we have talked about many times before. So in the first phase, they say it's going to be CMMC level 1, CMMC level 2 self-assessment, up to our discretion and applicability. It could be level 2 C3PAO.
Yep.
Phase 2, 12 months from November 10th, 2025, then it will be level 1 self-assessment, level 2 self-assessment, level 2 C3PAO. Then you go a year later, all of a sudden it's level 3, right? Which is all the requirements in NIST SP 800-172. All of this is explained at 32 CFR 170. Be sure to read that if you're curious about how option years are going to be rolled out across these phases. So what's up with this 7-year period? DoD says, well, for the total number of contracts that are out in the ecosystem, it will take 7 years for them to all age off and for an entirely new set of requirements to replace that ecosystem, right? So for all currently awarded contracts, they won't all go away and be, you know, done or whatever in just 3 or 4 years. It'll take 7 years for all the contracts to be done. So they say, we're going to roll this out over 4 phases, but it will take 7 years for all contracts to now include CMMC requirements. So that's where the discrepancy comes from. It's not a 7-year phased rollout. Like we're not going to hit November 10th and then you won't be asked to get a CMMC requirement for 7 years, right? You're going to see it in the new contracts way before then. So there you go. That's where it comes from. All righty. Let's see here. Is there such a thing as CMMC level 3 conditional status? Yes, there is. CMMC level 3 has POAM items. It has POAM guidance. You can win a CMMC level 3 requirement contract if you do not have a final status, if you have a conditional status, which means you have open items on a POAM. You still have the same 180 days to close those items. You still have to go through a closeout assessment. However, all CMMC level 3 assessments are conducted via DoD's own DIBCAC auditing team, not a C3 PAO that you go hire. So you have to coordinate all of that with the DIBCAC team. Just know, in order to go through your CMMC level 3 assessment, all of your CMMC level 2 items have to be implemented. You have to have your final status at CMMC level 2 before you can get to level 3. If you are, for instance, one of our 50 clients that have their CMMC level 2 and you want to start the process of your CMMC level 3 assessment, the DIBCAC website says to reach out to them. They've got their email address on there, and that gets the ball rolling on their coordination. I've heard rumors out there that DIBCAC is starting to get spun up on the CMMC level 3 assessment process, but we won't actually see that in contracts until well into the phased rollout, according to current guidance. So there you go. You can win a contract with a conditional status at level 3 or at level 2.
And CMMC level 3 assessments are free by DIBCAC.
That's right. That's right.
You just got to pay the millions of dollars to get there.
Yeah, I'm sure they cost a lot of things other than money.
Yes, they do.
Which, by the way, public service announcement, NIST SP 800-172 revision 3, the final draft is out for public comment. Public comments are due November 15th. So be sure to check that out if you want a peek into the future of the requirements that will show up at CMMC level 3. Check out the final draft of 171 Rev 3. 172 Rev 3 and 172A Rev 3. Those are both out for public comment right now. All righty, let's see here. Nick, I think we missed the first part of your question because I see part 2 of 2, but I didn't see part 1 of 2. Does that mean if this year we successfully passed DIBCAC high assessment, we can count on CMMC status? So all of the grandfathering from joint surveillance assessments conducted by DIBCAC and C3 PAOs have been converted over to CMMC level 2. That was happening in the period around the time the 32 CFR rule was published and going into effect at the end of 2024. If you go undergo a DIBCAC high assessment, that doesn't translate to a CMMC level 2 status. It's a separate thing that they reserve the right to do. As we've talked about before, as far as we can tell, DIBCAC high assessments, DIBCAC showing up of their own volition to knock on your door to run through your control environment, very strong indicator that you will be required to have CMMC level 3 status in the future. DIBCAC high assessments are not random lotteries. Everybody that you talk to who goes through those assessments is doing some pretty high speed, pretty cool stuff. Nick, you don't have to tell us what you do, but obviously everybody that we've talked to anecdotally, it's pretty obvious why they would need level 3. The reason why you get that phone call and the list of people who get that phone call and why is not public. The critical technology list, I can't remember exactly what it's called, that OSD Research and Engineering, OSD R&E has, is not a public document. So they just show up and that's basically like the omen that you'll need to deal with CMMC level 3 in the future. So be aware. All righty. Andy's here. He says it's shocking how much resistance there is to getting ready for mandatory compliance.
Crazy.
That's imagine a world where you didn't need to do that, right? If everybody was like, oh, we got 7012 in the contracts, we'll just do it. We never would have had to have CMMC. We never would have been able to hang out here every Friday because we wouldn't have needed a hotline. Let's see. Priceless Pancake, I hope you feel better. Okay. Question 1 of 2. Listener since live stream number 1.
Hey,
okay,
right.
Here we go. The OGs are here. First time commenter. I think this is the first time we've had a comment that said long time listener, first time caller.
I love it.
How do you handle CUI marking for physical backups of our data? If some CUI has a dissemination control do we have to find out which specific backup drives have that CUI on it? Or can we put it all in a compliant storage container and mark that? Thank you guys for doing these.
Great question. So it's a highest level problem in the sense of if you have no foreign dissemination on CUI, you can put that data together in the same storage location. However, the requirements have to be elevated to the higher of the two. So obviously it would be a CUI asset. You've got to apply 110, or in this case, security protection asset from a backup perspective. You've got to apply all relevant controls to that asset type. But then because you have no foreign, you also have to look at who has the ability to access that data in an unencrypted technical format, right? Or unencrypted data, specifically the no foreign data. And so then you have some administration that you have to do around, okay, is everyone with the ability to access the de-encryption keys of that backup, or if the backup's not encrypted, be able to access it natively and restore that data in an unencrypted format? Do I have any non-US persons able to do that? And then so you have to start segmenting that out. But yes, you can put no foreign dissemination CUI next to regular CUI, if you will, basic or type CUI. But you have to basically look at which one has the higher of the two watermarks and build the environment and the controls to that.
Yeah, and I believe it's DCSA that has the marking training on there. So definitely go check that out for sure. And they'll have all of the official guidance on the high level watermark for just marking CUI at the top and the bottom or whatever it happens to be. It's marking that looks like classified markings, but it doesn't have the same rules. So definitely check out the official training for sure. All right, Joyce is here. She said, do you need to be the one that owns software licenses, or are you able to access subcontractor-owned software, such as AutoCAD, within the CUI environment and maintain compliance?
Do you need to be the one that owns software licenses, or are you able to access subcontract? So here's a little bit of the conundrum. I guess the answer could be yes or no. So if there's an asset that's processing, storing, and transmitting CUI, it needs to be part of your scope, right? Unless there's a contractual flow down to you and you're now, let's say, using the prime's equipment as part of their environment, right? So I guess I'm a little confused. Like if it doesn't process, store, or transmit CUI and it's just software activation, it doesn't even really fall into the scope of CMMC, right? It's just an application as long as it's on an allow list or not on the deny list. So that part doesn't really matter. If the application's processing or transmitting CUI, it would need to be under your boundary if it's work that you're performing on behalf of the contract on your assets, right? So like if you're using a software subscription from a partner or a prime on your systems, like that's okay. But if that software process, stores, or transmits CUI and you don't have ownership of that asset, it's an external connection at a minimum, and we have to make sure that that's compliant upstream. I guess I'm a little confused by the question, Joyce. Anything that's CUI that you own, you need to protect. Anything that's CUI that someone else owns, they need to protect, and there's contractual flow downs to make sure that that happens. Most software activation has no bearing on CUI assets unless there's maybe cloud storage attached to that. So like Autodesk, AutoCAD, they have their own clouds, ACC, et cetera, where that could be in scope. So I don't, if you can clarify your question a little bit more, I think I can probably answer it better, but that's kind of the best I have right now.
Yeah, absolutely. All righty. Does an external service provider having remote access tools like Screen Connect on an OSC's computer qualify as processing, storing, or transmitting CUI?
Depends. So if you have Screen Connect, which I think still is a ConnectWise product now, and it's set up technically to disable those things like file transfer, screen capture, things like that, and you have a policy saying we will not use that tool to do these things, then you could leave it out of scope and just security protection asset. However, by limiting the technical capabilities of that system, you limit your ability to provide as robust support as you currently do. So the question comes down to, I can have Screen Connect and make it be a CUI/SPA asset, right? Because if it processes, stores, or transmits CUI, it's a little bit heavier handed. FedRAMP comes into scope. So if you're using their FedRAMP cloud version of that tool, that's problematic. So there's that. Or I can restrict the tool and leave it just as an SPA and no CUI can be introduced to it. So it can swing either way. either policy and technical controls to limit CUI from being processed, stored, or transmitted and leave it as a security protection asset, or keep those tools. And then if it's like the cloud version of the Screen Connect tool, then you have to have a FedRAMP version of that tool, which the last I checked, ConnectWise does not have. So you're in a little bit of a conundrum. It could go either way depending on how you've defined the asset and its capabilities.
Well, I have a question for Todd. Here's my best GeoGuessr thing. One, what is going on in your profile picture? Two, I believe you're in Japan. I want to know where you are and what's going on in the picture. What's up with the glasses? Judging by the haircut, the clean shave, you're in Japan, and the shirt, I'm going to assume you were either in the Navy or the Marine Corps. And based on your question, you were probably in IT of some sort. So when was this? What were you doing? Tell me more about the glasses. You can do it in the DM. It just looks like a fun story. So yeah, there you go. I have questions for you, Todd. All righty, let's see here. We did this 7 years. Is there a conditional status? All righty. True or false, Daniel? Sudden death time. GCC High is required to comply with DFARS Clause 252204/7012.
DFARS 7012 is...
You must have GCC High if you want to be compliant with DFARS 7012.
Okay. That makes a little bit more sense. I was like, Microsoft's not going to accept a contractual flow down to them. They're already attesting to meet the requirement. GCC High, you do not have to be in GCC High to comply with DFARS 7012. GCC will also afford you that availability, but it also depends on the type of CUI that you're working with. If your CUI is no foreign or export control, ITAR, EAR, etc., got to go GCC High because contractually Microsoft will provide the needed support for that. If you're just dealing with basic CUI, you're looking at the ability to do GCC. However, if you end up with export control a year down the line, you've got to migrate and re-implement all those controls in a higher Gov Cloud tenant. So no, long story short, GCCI doesn't have to be the only cloud to meet DFARS 7012. It can also be met in GCC depending on the type of CUI you have. Just to kind of paint a picture, 1,300 clients now we have here at Summit 7. I would say maybe a dozen, maybe 20 are on GCC because everybody wants to hedge their bets and not be able to rule themselves out of pursuing work that has no foreign export control requirements.
All right, Hotshot. Well, GCC High is required to achieve CMMC. True or false?
False. You can also do that with GCC. You can meet CMMC. So major things, we actually had this conversation at the construction conference. The four things, I guess, that can meet compliance for CMMC, because CMMC and export control data requirements are different, just for everyone's awareness. Azure Commercial, M365 GCC, M365 GCC High, and Azure Gov. So these four things are where you can meet and implement the CMMC controls. However, and I've had to say this again this morning, when you buy a license for the Gov Cloud, it does not automatically mean it's configured for CMMC. It's just meaning it's meeting FedRAMP moderate or high requirements, and that you now have the ability to configure the tenant to your liking. Microsoft does not know how you want to interpret what's now known as ODPs for NIST 172. They don't know what resources you plan to deploy. They don't know how you plan to use the environment, so they do not pre-configure it to meet CMMC technical 110 controls, just the FedRAMP requirement.
Nice. Hey, I nailed it. He was in Naha when he was in the Marines. So yeah, Okinawa. Nice. I probably could have guessed that one. Fun fact: my wife still has her Girl Scouts vest that has all the patches from when she was in the troop in Okinawa, which is super cool. Cool. But yeah, all right. It was pretty easy. But I'm gonna give myself the points for that one. So
that's where my aunt is from. Funny enough, Okinawa.
There you go. Alrighty, let me get back here up to chat. We talked about external service providers. Sandy said, I have seen solicitations that have files marked as CUI in the documents you need to respond. I don't know what the Gov customer does right now to determine that you can be provided CUI info. They don't. They make no determination about whether you can handle CUI info. It's a big problem. Daniel, it's a big problem.
Kind of a cart and horse scenario, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this before too, right? Where it's a hole. It's a hole in the process. It's a hole in the regulation. It's a hole in oversight. It's a hole in the control of controlled data, in the sense that if the solicitation is involving controlled data, but you have to have proof that you can protect the controlled data prior to the award, you're getting the controlled data before you've proven, one, that you're the one who needs it, and two, that you can protect it, right? I mean, it's a big problem. It's a big problem. So yeah, we see that all the time. We've seen this too, where people were saying over the years while we were waiting for CMMC that they would get CMMC DFARS Clause 7021 in their contracts, even though it wasn't authorized to be there. It's, it's not a pretty or clean process. There's lots of stuff that gets through the system, honestly.
Let's see, a LinkedIn comment just to clarify some of my other stances on GCCI and GCC from a FedRAMP compliance. Google Workspace Enterprise Plus with assured controls, AWS Gov. So there are a few other vendors out there just from what we specialize in. It's the Microsoft Gov stack.
Yeah.
No need to duck whoever that LinkedIn user is. So.
Yeah. John says, my company still has not seen CUI markings, but we definitely do things that should be CUI. Yeah. It's one or the other. Oftentimes people are dealing with what is obviously technical data, things that ought to be marked as CUI, and it's undermarked, or they're dealing with stuff that is clearly not CUI and it's overmarked. A lot of times this gets blamed on the CMMC program. And I know that people on LinkedIn hate it when I do this. I get accused of being out of touch and pedantic and unhelpful, but it is true. The CMMC program is not the same thing as the DoD CUI program. And so you have to push back, if at all possible, on the under or over marking issue. It is not the CMMC program's office that is the one doing the marking. They're not responsible for CUI marking or under marking. They have no control over marking or under marking. The way they used to describe this back in the day was CMMC is everything that happens after you have figured out what the data is or not, where the data goes or not, what your scope is or not. CMMC comes in after all that's done and does the verification. So marking issues, overmarking, undermarking is a separate problem that is very akin to the DoD basically saying this is a Wendy's and we can't help you. But it's another one of those things that gets laid at the feet of CMMC, where they're like, well, I have to have GCC high, and you're like, ITAR makes you have to go into sovereign clouds, and you're like, well, I'm having marking issues, and you're like, that's the CUI program folks over in INS. This is just the verification process for the requirements in DFAR 7012. So not exactly helpful, but you got to push back, hopefully. Or if you're getting unmarked CUI, then maybe don't push back. You know what I'm saying?
Scott.
Yeah. Yeah, not pedantic, but accurate. Yeah, it's like that famous GIF. Why are you booing me? I'm right. Let's see. Todd says, technically CUI is non-public information. So if it's on the solicitation, it's public and therefore not CUI. Yeah, I mean, it's a very weird situation, because they're not supposed to be making CUI public, but they put it out onto these systems. We've seen marked CUI on publicly available DoD information systems before. I can't remember what the exact situation was. There was something going on. I can't remember. There was some big mobilization thing happening, and one of the DoD offices or components was putting marked CUI on their website. I would have to go back and look. I think we talked about this on a podcast a couple of years ago, and we called the number at the bottom of the marking for CUI, and we talked to the guy, and we were like, hey man, your CUI is all on the public side. And they were like, oh yeah, we mark everything CUI and then get it up there because we got other stuff to do. And I was like, but that's not how the regulation works. And then they hung up. So push back if you can, everybody. Push back if you can.
Do we want to try the recording, the voicemail that we got?
Oh yeah. Let's see here. Where is it?
We haven't done one of these in a while. These are fun.
Here we go.
So I have a basic question about the scope of CMMC. I work for an OEM and we sell industrial automation control systems to the DoD. These systems are typically massive warehouse automation projects like automated pallet handling, racking, storage, and conveyance, along with automated guided vehicles to move pallets to human pick stations. The DoD owns and operates these systems once they are commissioned. Anyways, there seems to be conflicting interpretation on the scope of CMMC as it applies to OEMs like us, and I was wondering which view is correct. View number one is that as an OEM, we do handle and store CUI, such as warehouse design schematics, run rates, as commissioned software, etc. Therefore, CMMC applies to the enterprise IT systems that handle that information. View number two is that the systems we sell to DoD have to be compliant with CMMC. So which view is correct, if either? And can you describe the scope of CMMC in layman's terms as it applies to OEMs like us that sell equipment to the DoD, who are the ultimate asset owners and operators? Thanks for your help. Cheers.
Okay, this is a big one, especially the last part, the simple explanation. So we're seeing this a lot with solution implementers, SIs, right? On the SaaS side, but then, obviously on the hardware side as well. Your product itself could very well not be CUI. So if you're not processing, storing, or transmitting, if your product itself is not doing that, then it's not going to be a CUI asset, and it's probably going to fall under COTS exemptions. However, if in order to use a piece of technology that you've created that is COTS, that you're having to now customize to meet DoD requirements, you're going to fall into scope of CMMC requirements. So here's the conundrum. You have to get drawings from the DoD in order to help build and configure the systems that the DoD needs, right? So you're getting technical drawings. The pro-serve, pre-sales, or sales engineering activity where you're having that CUI, they have to release CUI in order for you to do the work to deliver the product you need. And even if the product itself is COTS, and you're just stacking it and configuring it a little bit different for the DoD, the fact that you're going to be in receipt of CUI or controlled technical information or whatever it is, it's probably not CTI, but some level of information marked CUI, you're going to have to fall under CMMC requirements, whatever the contract states under DFAR 7021. So your product itself, likely not CUI in a vacuum if you're selling this to commercial companies left and right. However, the data that you need in order to sell or customize those pieces of equipment, you'll likely be in receipt of CUI at some point, probably not generating it per se, but at least in receipt of it to do the work. So I think your pro-serve part of your business, your sales engineer, architect, whatever portion, is going to have to be in an enclave to be able to receive those documents and to meet the requirements in DFAR 7021, assuming that CUI is disseminated to you. Jacob,
Alrighty.
Does that sound pretty good?
No, it does. It does. Absolutely.
Okay.
That was a great example. So go to CUIHotline.org if you got a long question and you can call the number. It's a great format if you have a long, in-depth question, because typing it out just in chat, can be an issue. And sometimes even the form can run out of space. So if you want to leave the message, then we love hearing you. And when we're off screen, it gives us a chance to hydrate and drink some water. So
Right.
We appreciate it whenever people leave the messages. Okay. Arroz con gandules, the national dish of Puerto Rico, has a question. Man, I have not had arroz con gandules in a while. I got to go do that this weekend. It's rice, peas, and pork. It's delicious, everybody. Okay, does implementing GCC High help complying with the majority of the technical controls for CMMC Level 2 for a small business of 10 employees?
Great question. Yes and no. GCC High does not come pre-configured to meet CMMC. There's a CMMC technical architecture guide. There's a CMMC placemat. There's elements to kind of guide you along that journey if you don't want to use a partner like us. But that can be relatively complex. The real answer to this for you is, does it have the majority of the necessary tools and capabilities that you will need to get CMMC compliant? And the answer to that is yes. So it is more of a one-stop shop to be able to check a lot of the boxes. It does require you to configure those features in order to meet CMMC. You have to do that yourself or hire a partner or consultant to do that for you. If you're doing an enclave environment and you're keeping all the data in CUI and you're leaving physical devices out of scope, so it's primarily virtual desktop, then it even is a better example because you get to inherit all the physical controls from Microsoft and your physical systems wouldn't be in scope. So you don't have to account for those physical controls on-prem. just those from Microsoft. But again, that's assuming all CUI is in the cloud and you're not using any kind of physical devices for processing, storing, or transmitting that CUI. So it is a really good solution from more of a one-stop shop perspective. However, it does not come pre-configured. You do have to do a fair amount of work to get it there. I think it's somewhere around 12 or 1,500 unique configurations in order to meet CMMC.
Yeah, absolutely. All righty, everybody. Well, that's the hour. If we didn't get to your question, there was a ton in chat that we didn't get to. We'll add it to the backlog, and then we'll get to it as we can on future episodes. We do it every Friday. If you find this afterwards, you can leave your questions in chat on LinkedIn or on YouTube. You can always DM us questions. We're always interested, no matter how basic they are. Like I said before, you go to CUIHotline.org. You can fill out the form with your question. You can leave your question at the hotline number. It is a real working number. You can check that out, and we'll go from there. I'm going to go get some Puerto Rican food. I hope everybody has a good weekend, and we'll see you next week.
See y'all.